we mentioned Jeff Scott's name. So while we're here, let's go ahead and, take it. Number one, I've seen it be floated that Jeff Scott, I don't know, just go to Clemson. Like
I
right
floated
now.
here Saturday night.
Yeah, just go ahead and why don't you just show up, and why don't you, like, at a minimum, you could be a special assistant. You could be there for scouting. You could be there for game planning. It would be some new ideas from a time when Clemson's offense was much more successful. And look, I am not ready to break down the X's and O's. My observation of clunky was definitely a layman's observation. Statistically, they have at times through this run had some of the best offenses in the country. They've been wildly productive, and I'm sure that a Clemson fan or Dabo himself would point to that. But that has not been recently, as we have noted here on the podcast. But Jeff Scott was a part of helping be the architect of offenses that, yes, with elite quarterback play, but were ranking near the top of the ACC in most categories, and yes, were among the most productive, 10 to 15 most productive in the entire country. But he is coming off a rough run at USF with the Bulls. Now that he is out, what is the South Florida Bulls program? Like, what do you do if you are athletic director Michael Kelly? What are the expectations if you are a USF fan in the Tampa area who, way back when, we always like to invoke that crazy 2007 season, found themselves all the way up in the top 2 of the BCS rankings, yet now they find themselves with just one win against an FBS opponent in the tenure of their last head coach, just 4 wins overall for Jeff Scott in that run. How does this program start to rebuild, and what are realistic expectations?
I think it's a really interesting question, Chip. Like South Florida is really not a great job in the old American Conference, because you had schools like UCF and Houston and Cincinnati, which were much better. But now with the new American, which is very watered down, I think it's entirely reasonable to think that USF should be near the top of that league, because they do have enough money to do that, and they have the local resources. And yet you ask, like, okay, they have one win over an FBS team. I think Scott had some challenges there, as did many coaches who came in during the COVID year. Like, recruiting was really tough. They had to go pretty transfer heavy. I thought they made a good hire this year in Travis Trickett, by the way, who still has the offense scoring points despite losing like both starting tackles and their starting quarterback, who they took from the transfer portal. But I think that USF fired Jeff Scott means it's serious about winning, at least within the American. I think they were very salty about UCF getting the Big 12 nod over them, and like USF not getting it. They had the indoor done. One of their board of trustees guys is rallying money around this. They plan to do the on-campus stadium. I'll believe that when I see it, but I do think that you don't fire Jeff Scott after you gave him an extension if you're not serious. And I think USF is fairly serious here about spending more money and bringing in somebody. It's not a bad job in the new American.
Bill O'Brien for USF.
Oh
no,
gosh.
I think like Saban would probably love that. I think a name to watch here who has had success at USF, knows the area, recruits the area well, would be Tom Allen at Indiana. Like, Indiana keeps losing games. Things aren't going well there. I don't know what his buyout is. I don't know if they're going to fire him. I don't know if he would just be willing to walk and sort of, as coaches say, restart the clock. But I think he could do well there. Maybe a Tom Herman, who has done well in a city school. Now, USF is trying to be more collegiate and less commuter. Mm-hmm. Over past years, they've become some of that, but it's still like you don't have the on-campus stadium, right? You have to deal with some of those same things that you dealt with at Houston. I could see that. I think you probably give Dion a call here. I don't know if Dion would take it. I think he wants more of a Power 5 job. I don't think he's going to get a job like Auburn, but I think you at least engage Dion to see. He is from Florida, only about an hour and a half south in North Fort Myers. Those would make some sense. One of the problems, though, I think you're going to have is, like, you need to have guys who can score points to get fans to come to your stadium, which is not on campus right now. They play in the Buck Stadium, Raymond James. And I think there's a lot of candidates you would think of, hey, they're hot offensive coordinator, like Go Lesh at Tennessee, or maybe Kendall Briles at Arkansas or something like that. But will they go offensive coordinator with no head coaching experience? Sort of like Richard Johnson at SI, said, like, has the whole, like, you don't see black coaches hired back to back typically, right? You also don't see schools going coordinator no experience to coordinator no experience, because it's hard to sell to the guys cutting the checks of like, hey, why did this guy fail? No head coaching experience. Well, we're not going to get another guy just like that. We need to reverse course and do something different. So I don't know, like a stretch candidate, if they could get Chadwell, but I don't think Chadwell would take the job. Maybe a Sean Lewis at Kent State. Like they're not having a great year, but that's a really, really tough place to win. And they've had a couple of the best years Kent State's ever had under them. So he would be exciting.
I will say, if I'm a USF fan, I would be a lot more excited about any of those coordinators than I would be Tom Allen.
I agree.
Tom Allen,
he's a good football coach.
Hey, now
you can't win in
I
Indiana.
agree.
Like
Right.
you can't win in Indiana. It's
not
it's
a
a
And I
paycheck
do
job.
remember a lot of Florida talent on that roster when they were winning. You know, when he had that year that he came. I agree with you though, Tom. I don't think that inspires like
That's
the
not
great
great.
welcoming by the boosters. There's going to be some massive party. It would probably get panned from those. Like, huh? There'd be a lot of Google search going on from the USF fan base. I totally agree with Butt said. I'd be really careful. Also, I think everyone needs to be careful of hiring away coordinators who are at programs with elite talent and elite quarterback play. You know, like, I mean, I'm not even sure what input Jeff Scott was having on that offense at Clemson when he was there. It was kind of already flowing when you had it there. So I think going with somebody with head coaching experience. Tom Herman was an interesting suggestion because I think he'd be an absolute home run. And it's further removed from the former Texas head coach. Let's bring him in here like they did with Charlie Strong. You know, so at least they've had somebody. Because that's, again, you kind of say like you don't go back to back, but at least if it was further in the rear view, you could say, all right, let's try it one more time. And he had a lot more success at Texas than Charlie Strong did.
I know he's 65 years old, but can we bring Jim Leavitt back?
They're not going to do that. I asked about that specifically this morning. Like, no, absolutely not. On the Jeff Scott thing, basically I was told is like he tried to instill Clemson's culture at USF, and that's not a place where that's going to work. Okay, you need to be able to work with some edgier kids, some kids who may have a little bit of issues, some kids who have kids, right? Like basically is what I was told. So, yeah.
You know what the funniest outcome would be here?
I'm always here for the funny.
Scott Frost.
Scott Frost
At the USF. I don't think there's any way in the world it happens, but that would be hilarious.
Like budget-wise, though, what school in the New American is going to outspend them, really? So you think about this. East Carolina probably has a similar budget. Memphis has a big budget, but Memphis spends a lot of that budget on basketball. SMU is not going to the Big 12, right?
No.
So SMU will outspend you. Western Kentucky, did they get into the New American?
No.
UTSA did, right? And UAB did?
Right.
Yes.
So those schools will not outspend you,
And
most
Charlotte.
likely. And Charlotte will definitely not outspend you, given what we're hearing about, you know, how that coaching search is going. So, I mean, it's reasonable to expect USF to be a top 4 team in this league consistently with a good head coach, given the spending they're going to do, I think.